In every family, there's someone who blends into the background, someone whose presence is barely acknowledged. For Seraphina, that person had always been her. She wasn't the center of attention, nor was she the one who stood out. But that didn't bother her, at least not until that fateful evening. The night everything would change. It had been a typical family gathering, as predictable as it had always been. The dinner table was set, the food was passed around, and the conversation flowed as it always did. Her mother gushing about her brother's fiancée, Jessica, and her father subtly reminding Seraphina of the things she hadn't done, the things she had failed to accomplish. The usual. Yet, as the evening wore on, something felt different. The air seemed thicker, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. Maybe it was the way her brother looked at her, a look that said nothing but implied everything. Or perhaps it was the soft, disapproving glance her mother cast in her direction when her name came up in conversation. But Seraphina had learned to ignore it. She had learned to blend in. After all, what else was she supposed to do? She wasn't the one with the promising career, or the one with the future everyone could see. No, that was Jessica, the fiancée, the rising star. She was the one everyone talked about, the one everyone admired. Seraphina had long stopped fighting for attention or approval. She was used to it. And yet, that evening would be the moment she stopped being invisible. The conversation continued, swirling around her like a storm she couldn't escape. Her father mentioned a new business venture he was considering, but his words barely registered. Her mother's voice, ever so sweet and proud, filled the air with praise for Jessica, who in turn beamed, accepting the attention with grace. Seraphina didn't mind, or so she told herself. She wasn't the type to chase approval. Still, the tightness in her chest couldn't be ignored. Her family had always made her feel like she was a footnote in their story. The afterthought. The nobody. It wasn't new. It wasn't even unexpected. But there was something different in the air that evening, a change Seraphina couldn't place. Perhaps it was the subtle shift in Jessica's behavior. Perhaps it was the way she kept glancing at her phone, her eyes lighting up with an unspoken curiosity. It wasn't until the conversation came to a sudden halt that Seraphina realized what had been brewing beneath the surface. It started with Jessica's gaze. She was looking at Seraphina, but there was something new in her eyes. Something sharp, calculating, almost searching. Seraphina caught her breath, but before she could make sense of it, Jessica spoke, though not aloud. Instead, her fingers danced over her phone, typing furiously into the search bar. For a moment the world seemed to stop. Seraphina felt a prickling sense of unease slither down her spine. She had seen Jessica search for things before, but this was different. This time it was her name that Jessica was typing in. And in that moment, Seraphina's heart raced. Something about that felt wrong. The seconds dragged by, each one stretching longer than the last. The room was tense, the air thick with an uncertainty that hadn't been there just moments before. The clink of silverware against plates seemed to echo louder now. Time seemed to slow, as if the universe was waiting for something to unfold. And then it happened. Jessica's fingers froze. Seraphina's eyes narrowed slightly, her instincts screaming at her to stand up, to run away, to avoid whatever was coming next. But she stayed still, her mind racing as she tried to calm her racing heart. She didn't know what Jessica had found, but she could feel it. A shift, a tremor in the fabric of the evening that had already been too predictable. Seraphina's family had always treated her like a secret, something to be kept hidden. They never talked about her past. They never spoke of the things that had brought them to this point. But now the silence was deafening, the tension in the air suffocating. Jessica slowly placed her phone on the table, her expression unreadable. But Seraphina could see it, the faintest flicker of recognition, the faintest hint of something akin to shock. The faintest trace of a truth that had been kept hidden for too long. As Seraphina sat there, The weight of the situation began to settle over her like a suffocating blanket. She knew what was coming next. She had known it in the pit of her stomach the moment Jessica had started typing her name into that search bar. She didn't need to hear it. She could feel it, the unspoken judgment, the dawning realization in Jessica's eyes. Seraphina had always known that her family's past wasn't a topic for conversation. Her father's downfall had been a source of embarrassment. His bankruptcy, the scandal that had rocked their family, was a secret they had carried like a heavy burden. They had tried to bury it, tried to shield Seraphina from the harsh reality of their diminished status. But now that secret was exposed. The truth had been revealed, and there was no going back. Seraphina could feel the eyes of her family on her, could feel their judgment without them saying a word. Her father's disappointed gaze, her mother's guilty silence, her brother's uncomfortable shift in his seat. They all knew. They all understood what this meant. But Jessica, oh Jessica, the one who had always seemed so perfect, so untouchable, she was the one who had unearthed the truth. She was the one who had found out what Seraphina had tried so hard to bury. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The quiet, the tension, the weight of years of secrets pressing down on Seraphina. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if all the walls she had built around herself were crumbling away in an instant. But Seraphina wasn't the same person she had been when she first walked into that room. No, something had shifted within her. She had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed out of the limelight, the one who accepted her place as the overlooked member of the family. But tonight something was different. Tonight she wasn't going to be silenced. Her gaze never wavered from Jessica's face. The shock, the disbelief, it was all there, written clearly in her eyes. Jessica had expected something different, something perhaps more in line with the image of Seraphina that she had once known, the one she had conjured up in her mind. But the reality was something Jessica hadn't anticipated. Seraphina wasn't going to cower. She wasn't going to shrink back into the shadows. No, tonight she was going to stand her ground. The shock was there, but it wasn't just Jessica who was affected. It was everyone. As the seconds stretched into minutes, Seraphina felt a wave of clarity wash over her. She had nothing left to hide. Nothing left to lose. The family she had always tried so hard to please had failed her time and time again. They had dismissed her, ignored her, and treated her as if she didn't matter. But now they were going to see who she really was. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her voice when it came was steady. No longer trembling, no longer unsure. The truth had a way of forcing itself to the surface. And now, Seraphina was going to let it flow, to let the world see the reality that had been hidden for so long. It wasn't the riches. It wasn't the scandal. It wasn't even the past that defined her. No, it was the strength she had found within herself that mattered. The strength to rise above it all. The strength to finally say, "I am not your nobody." And so, Seraphina left that room. Not as the quiet daughter, not as the forgotten one, but as someone who had finally found her voice. It was a painful journey, but it had been one she needed to take. The truth had set her free, even if it had come at the expense of her family's comfort. As she stepped out into the night, the cool air washing over her, she knew she had taken the first step.